Hi, this is Mike Didonna, Senior Revenue Cloud Consultant for Thunder. And today we'll be explaining the Salesforce order and order product setup for invoicing in Salesforce billing. So let's go over a few key points in general for invoicing. So keep in mind that invoicing requires the correct data setup on order product, and invoice scheduler. So it's kind of a dance between these three objects within the system. I've mentioned this on the previous explainer video on the invoice scheduler, that invoice scheduler only invoices order products that are eligible to be invoiced. And finally, again, I can't stress this sometimes enough, that invoice scheduler simply runs. And if the product doesn't get invoiced, it's usually because of a data issue on the order product, or data issues on the invoice scheduler setup, or something that's blocking the invoice scheduler from saving the invoice record or the invoice lines. Okay, so when I'm trying to troubleshoot why an order product was not invoiced by an invoice run from the invoice scheduler, the first place I always start is on the invoice scheduler. So again, you can see here, this include all currencies box is checked. So in multi-currency orgs, you have the opportunity to, or ability to specify the currency that you want this invoice scheduler to operate in. And so if the order product is in a different currency than the currency selected on the invoice scheduler, that won't, that order product will not be picked up. So if the order product is in pounds, but the scheduler has a currency selection of US dollars, that order product will not be picked up by that invoice scheduler. So one way to get around that is to make sure this include all currencies box is checked by default. You can set that by default in the system, or you can just check it when you do the invoice scheduler, set up your invoice scheduler. So that's an important one to check. Another one I check is the target date. So you can see this invoice scheduler has a target date of 11/11/2022. And if I look at a corresponding order product, its next billing date is 12/1/2022. So if I was running this invoice scheduler on 11/11, it will not pick up that order product because its next billing date is after the target date for that particular invoice scheduler. So again, the next billing date, going back to my order product, has to be on or before, going back to the invoice scheduler, the target date specified on the invoice scheduler. Another area to check is coming back up to the invoice batch setting. You can see in this particular scheduler, the invoice batch is set for batch 3. So the value set on the invoice scheduler must match the corresponding value in this field set on the order, not the order product. Again, this value is set on the order, not the order product. So looking at my order in this case, coming down, you can see this invoice batch setting is blank. So again, for this particular invoice scheduler that we just looked at, it will not pick up this order because the invoice batch on the order is the value of the invoice batch field on the order does not match the value of the invoice batch set in Salesforce. So that's another thing to make sure that those are in line. Finally, if you're using usage products, there's a fun little twist that comes with invoicing usage products. So on that invoice scheduler, you'll need to make sure that bill usage charges is checked. If it's not, it will not pick up any usage products or usage charges. So that's important to remember. And then another fun twist for this is looking at the dates as it relates to usage products. So going back to an order product, go up here and look at the related. And this one has a usage summary assigned to it. So looking at the usage summary, you can see here on the usage summary, it has its own next billing date of 12/31. Now, if you remember from what I said about a minute ago, that invoice scheduler uses its target date and compares it to the target date on the next billing date, on the order products or the usage summary. And you remember that I said the target date on the next billing date on an order product can be on or before the target date of the invoice scheduler. That's not the case with usage summary. So for example, if I had a invoice scheduler and the target date on the invoice scheduler was set at 12/31, this usage won't be picked up, because for usages, the target date of the invoice scheduler has to be after the next billing date set on the usage summary. So just keep that in mind. So for regular order products, the target date, the invoice schedule on the invoice scheduler can be the same or after the next billing date on the order product. But for a usage product and to bill usage summaries, the target date on the invoice scheduler has to be after the next billing date specified on the usage summary. Okay, now that if you've gone through those checklists on the invoice scheduler that we just went through, and those all seem fine, then the next place I like to look for issues is on the order product. So now I'm on an order product record, and let's just start walking through what I like to check. So I like to start at the beginning and make sure that the order product status is activated. Again, this can be independent of the status of the order. So an order can be draft, but an order product can be activated. And this is the status that is the important one for invoicing, on the status of the order product, not of the order. So first and foremost, the order product has to be activated. If it's not, doesn't really matter about anything else. It will not be picked up by the invoice scheduler. Another thing I like to check here is billing frequency. So let's click into this field. You can see it's just standard pick list, and with these values in there that comes within the package. Now, while you can add custom values to the billing frequency pick list, you really shouldn't, because if you use a custom value, it will not invoice, because Salesforce doesn't know how to handle it. So there's some calculations that go on behind the scenes based on these values within the package, and if it's a custom value, Salesforce won't know what to do with it. So again, you can use it. I mean, you can enter the custom values in here if you want to, but it won't do you any good, and it will prevent an order product from being invoiced. Okay, on the order product, the quantity must be 1 or greater, or I guess greater than 0 is probably the better way to say that. If it's not going to be picked up. Going down, that's somewhat related. The billable unit price has to be greater than 0. Cannot be blank or 0, because again, it's not going to invoice it at that point. Salesforce doesn't want to invoice for something where there's no balance to be collected. So it won't invoice for a blank or $0 billable unit price for that order product. Elsewhere, you can see here, there's a tax rule that's required for order products to be invoiced. So that has to be populated. And also the calculation status cannot be an error. So let's click into this calculation status. Again, it's a pick list, and it can be various statuses, but what it cannot be is an error. So usually if it's queued, that means you haven't made a tax call. If it's processed in the middle of it, completed, or warning like this is fine to get it to invoice. Because in this particular instance, I'm using a tax rule that specified as no tax. So again, it's a warning, but again, it will invoice this order product. If it's error, it just won't. There's another field, and I apologize for moving up and down the order product. Another field that I like to check here is hold billing. If this field is set to yes, it's a pick list, yes, no. If the field is set to yes, doesn't matter what else happens, this order product is not going to be picked up for invoicing. So again, make sure that the hold billing there is set to yes. And then coming back to one of the fields I keep hammering home on, next billing date. This field has to have a date in it. If it's blank, it will not be picked up by invoice scheduler. So if it doesn't have a date in there, doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to get picked up for invoicing. Another thing to check is the billing rule on the order product. You can see here it's using this billing rule, billable separate. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. And if the billing rule being used on the order product has generate invoice to no, it will not be invoiced. So in this case, in this instance, the billing rule is set to yes. So this will allow it to be generated invoice. Let's look at that again. It's pretty self-explanatory. Yes, no, doesn't matter. You can set it. And if the no is set, if it uses the billing rule where there's no invoice, it will not generate an invoice for the order product. And that's because it affects another field that has to be set when the order product to be invoiced. And that is this field, invoice run processing status. So upon order product creation, usually if you're using a billing rule that has do not invoice, it sets the value in this field to will not invoice. In general, the status of this field to be eligible to be picked up by Invoice Scheduler must be pending billing. That will allow it to be picked up. If it's one of these other values, it's not going to be picked up by Invoice Scheduler. Okay, and now that we check the order product fields, if you're using a usage product or billing usages, you also need to then check the usage summary. So let's look at the usage summary setup here. We've already talked about the next billing date, but the status of the usage summary needs to be queued for invoice. That will allow it to be picked up by Invoice Scheduler. And then coming down here, similar to the order product, the invoice run processing status needs to be set to pending billing, and the invoice run status index also needs to be set to pending billing. So that again will allow the usage product to be picked up. On these two slides are just going through the fields that we just looked at to check for the order product. And so that's the process that I usually go through when I'm trying to figure out why an order product hasn't invoiced the way I've expected or showing up on the invoice at all. So again, I check Invoice Scheduler. I check my setup on the order product. And I also know that if it's using a usage product or there's usage summaries, I check the setup on that. So hopefully this was helpful and you enjoyed this video. Have a nice day.